Hello and welcome to Angel Insights, the show that goes deep into the world of early stage investing. I'm your host, Tom Britton, co-founder of SyndicateRoom. And on today's episode, I'm delighted to welcome Jessi Baker, MBE, visionary founder behind Provenance. Jessi's journey with Provenance is fascinating. Driven by her willingness to learn and adapt, she navigated the business through some tricky situations and made some decisions that, at the time, people disagreed with, like cutting off a very profitable consultancy arm of the firm to focus heavily on the SaaS business, which had yet to be proven. On today's episode, we'll explore the future of enterprise technology, how Provenance is leveraging AI to become the canonical data source for credible sustainability claims, and how high-risk, high-reward lessons learned from being an early blockchain pioneer of Ethereum shaped how she approaches business. But that's enough from me. Jessi, it's absolutely a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Before we dive into what Provenance does, I was hoping you could give me a bit of background on you, because you have quite an interesting story.
Yeah, sure thing. Happy to share my very non-linear career path. I was quite confused at school, started off both studying kind of sciences and mathematics, but then also creative subjects like art. So felt like a kind of mismatch. I didn't really fit anywhere for a long time. Ended up going to Cambridge studying engineering, which was a good foundation. But again, I didn't really feel like it was my thing. And I think I slowly figured out like what was really my calling. And it wasn't really a kind of vocation I really understood at school, which was really about building products. So both joining the ability to build things, so engineering, coding, and creativity, design, business ideas, entrepreneurialism. But yeah, definitely went a very long way about arriving at something I'm good at, I would say. So yeah, via an engineering degree and then working in the engineering kind of supply chain space for a long time. I guess first truly understood the provenance of products. I saw firsthand how products were made and all of the different steps that they went through before they reach us, the consumers, at the end of the chain. And that was definitely a moment of inspiration for starting Provenance. However, I didn't go straight there. I took a really inefficient route around studying at the Royal College of Art and working on lots of kind of crazy, creative, interactive design ideas for future digital interfaces, and then worked in marketing. So I was a creative technologist for a large advertising agency, working with really big brands like Adidas, British Airways on digital marketing activations. But somehow all of these experiences do make sense in the Provenance story. There's a bit of all of them as that have woven through this startup, but very non-linear start.
I want to talk about that creative technologist role for a second, because that sounds like they took two exciting words, put them together, and created a position.
Yep.
So exactly what did you do in that role?
So I was working for, big global advertising agency that in some senses was quite traditional. They had small digital pockets, but actually were doing a lot of above the line traditional 30-second TV ads. My job was to bridge that world and the digital team. And in those days, the digital team was very much doing just like generating Facebook ads and building apps with kind of new creative ideas. I did a lot of experience design work. So creating very digital brand activations is what we called it. So everything from like projection mapping on buildings to celebrate a certain brand to creating like digital interactive tennis games inside a mall in Tokyo. We made a vending machine for a toothpaste company that was activated by smiling into the camera.
That's
Experiential marketing using kind of new digital technology. But I was having come from working in supply chain before. I saw this huge disconnect in the advertising industry between what we were talking about and how we were selling products and the reality of how products were created. And that was a kind of burning passion I had underneath to evolve marketing into being facts, not fiction.
And was that the moment, though, that you decided, I want to do my own thing and tackle this problem?
I definitely had a feeling that I wanted to tackle that problem. And I think I was a bit nervous about it. So actually, what I ended up doing after working in advertising was going to do a PhD. And Provenance was actually a side project to my PhD for 4 years. So I did the lion's share of a PhD I still haven't written 100,000 words. So I'll do that at some point. But yeah, I didn't have the guts to just jump into starting a startup. But also, I didn't think I didn't really know exactly what I wanted it to be. I just knew that there was a disconnect for me between how products were made and how they were marketed. And I knew that as a shopper, I wanted to know more about the facts behind a product rather than marketing that was invented by advertisers. So I had a gut feeling that there was a problem to solve there. Through the PhD, I got to do a lot of experimentation with new technology, ideas for new kind of interfaces for information. So I think it was actually quite a good vehicle for thinking about a startup. I don't think my PhD supervisor would be very happy, but from my point of view, it was quite a useful experimentation period.
It definitely sounds like it was. And of course, you alluded to, you were working on Provenance in the background while doing the PhD. I'm curious, did the initial idea that you had for it evolve with each step of the PhD, or how did the evolution of Provenance come about? And at what point in time did you say, you know what, this is it, and go for it?
Yeah, so the vision and mission of Provenance has always been exactly the same, and it's still the same now. Like, the mission is really about empowering 1 billion citizens to choose products that match their values. And we really believe that there's a huge opportunity there to help change behavior and how people pick products. And the vision's always been one of transparency. So can we enable products to come with factual information about the impact they have, not just the price, etc. And those things have stayed true, and they were established quite early on. But those two things alone do not a business make. And so Provenance has been on a very long and relatively windy route to try and find product market fit within that vision and mission space. And it was quite fun exploring that through a PhD. The initial versions of Provenance, I look back and I think, wow, I was so naive. It's insane. I really believed that every product would have the full supply chain history behind it for that particular item, with all the kind of verified credentials. That vision was exciting and has actually shaped a lot of interesting regulation, like the EU digital passport regulations, but it's incredibly naive even today. So I think coming from that academic background was great to have the freedom, great to have the ability to experiment, but it wasn't very practical. And I think I realized I was on to something. I was attracting customers. I was attracting brands and retailers that were interested in the vision and mission. I guess eventually I just decided to trust the startup process, I guess, that I would eventually find a product that really worked. And there was a bit of a crunch point where I either had to write up my PhD or stop it and go full time on Provenance. There were too many businesses that were really interested in working with, and I didn't want to let that go. However, in hindsight, it was still quite early. Those businesses were the early adopters. And although they were great at helping set the way for the business today, probably should have done my PhD.
You can always come back to the PhD, but getting timing right for a product, you missed the wave and you're out of it.
That's true. And there's a momentum to startups, right? Like, as soon as you've got customers and people that are interested and you'll have live conversations with them, it's very hard to just be like, hold that thought, I'll come back.
There are two things where timing for you was a bit early. When you were doing your PhD, blockchain in particular became quite exciting. You're a technologist. And from my understanding, you were quite early with Ethereum working on it back in 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
When blockchain first came out, did you think this is the solution to what I'm trying to do? Or was it something that had to grow on you?
Oh no, I was really obsessed. I think as soon as I really understood it, so I discovered Bitcoin and digital currencies in sort of 2012, but I don't think I truly got it until 2013 when a friend of mine, we were just really having a discussion about it, and then it really landed. That moment in 2013, I thought this technology is going to change the world. It's going to rewire finance. I was so excited by it. Like, the ability to program money and create programmable financial rails just, for me, seemed amazing and so exciting. So I went head first and was very bullish on Ethereum as well. Provenance was the third ever built on the Ethereum blockchain. Again, we went very heavy on using blockchain in order to validate the credentials of a product. So looking at how you might track an item with a digital twin through a blockchain, including holding verified credentials. So we did a lot of experiments, used a lot of Bitcoin and a lot of Ethereum. It's really scary if you go back and see how much we spent and today's value in those ridiculous experiments. It's like quite upsetting.
We're talking in the hundreds of thousands.
Oh yeah. Hundreds of thousands. Just ridiculous. I was so obsessed with the technology that I was buying Bitcoin, buying Ethereum, and then there are a few places in London where you could buy sushi with Bitcoin. Now it's like I spent $430,000 on sushi. Like that's so fun. That's just ridiculous. But anyway, yeah, it's quite tragic when you look back at those days in that way. But at the same time, it was really fantastic to experiment with it as a technology. However, it was just completely impractical. It was non-compatible with the real world, and it's still non-compatible with the real world in lots of ways. It really has not had its browser moment. The user interface integration of cryptocurrencies and blockchain is still not arrived, even whatever it is now, 12 years later from all my initial experiment. But personally, I am still quite excited by it. I still think there's a lot of opportunity to decentralize businesses and include things like micropayments into the internet. But yeah, I was way too early on that one. I shouldn't have fluttered away quite so much of the currency, because then I'd be really rich. But unfortunately, bought too much sushi.
Now you're just a startup. If you had to explain to someone what Provenance is, what it does, and how it works, how would you do so?
Provenance is a software solution. It's used by brands and retailers to help them make credible green claims, sustainability claims. There's two kind of parts to the product. One is helping eradicate greenwash. So crawling all of the marketing and communications that you as a brand have put out there into the world and making sure there's no greenwash, no nefarious claims, nothing that could mean your brand is non-compliant or at risk of damaging your brand. And that's very much something that's utilizing AI and is a newer part to our product that has grown a lot in the past year or so. And then the other side of the product is more the sort of original kind of Provenance is about making credible claims. That is a process in order to enable you as a brand to make a claim and ensure it comes with all of the correct kind of data provenance. Claims might include everything from recyclable packaging, vegan, female-led business, all types of claims that relate to social and environmental impact. And our job is twofold. One, to reduce risk and increase efficiency for brands and retailers. So it's really easy for them to talk about sustainability. And on the other side, it's about growth. So making sure your claims are really being expressed in the best way they possibly could. Increasingly so they're picked up by LLMs, etc., in order to be able to make sure you're telling your brand story in the best possible way.
How do you verify the claim for those of us that are less tech savvy?
Yeah, so when I first started Provenance, we did a lot of kind of the real intricate claim verification. So really going all the way back through the supply chain. But actually over time, we decided to collaborate with others in that domain. So that means working with certifiers, other auditors, increasingly technology platforms that do traceability, etc. And then essentially we just interface with those systems and triangulate the different bits of information in order to create a credible claim. And I guess our job is more become, like a system of record for creating a credible claim, but also auditing the auditors, if that makes sense. So making sure at the end of the day, that claim it will really stand up if someone challenges it. We rely very much on partnerships for that now.
Very cool. You mentioned before, obviously, that the mission has very much stayed the same, but as we've talked about with blockchain and a few other things, you've had to pivot along the way. Oftentimes those pivots can be quite hard for founders. What have been some of the key pivots that you've made, and what have you learned from those pivots in your journey to becoming successful?
Yeah, so I'd say one of the main pivots we had was moving away from blockchain-based traceability to really focusing our attention on claims, consumer-facing claims about products, and then partnering with a lot of the systems that do the kind of internal traceability and auditing, providing more of a functionality to help align the data in the supply chain rather than working on the marketing communication side. Ultimately, it was just a decision of what we were more interested in doing as a team and also where we felt our expertise were. And quite a few of us had come from marketing, communications, working with brands and those kinds of things rather than supply chain. And so we felt like that was the right area for us to go. And I'm actually glad we did. It was a much more open space. less competitors, and lots of potential partners. So I think it was the right move for us. But that was a really important pivot. I think the other was we were quite a profitable consultancy alongside a software service for quite a while. We had clients that we were working with on general kind of strategy consulting and helping them understand the landscape of claims and technology. And yeah, essentially really working as services providers rather than a software solution. This was a strategic choice. We wanted to do this so that we could be really close to our customers and understand what they needed. But we made a hard decision, which was to shut down all consulting services and focus solely on software a couple of years ago, which was difficult. It was a big hit to our revenue, but we felt we couldn't move to scale the product quickly enough if it was a sideshow to the consulting. So yeah, it was tricky, a controversial choice. Again, I'm not 100% sure it was the right choice, especially now. The world of startups has become very interested in profitability and less about kind of extreme scaling, but extreme growth over profitability. So a bit of me wonders if we did really make the right decision. But at the end of the day, it's also a bandwidth thing. Like we wouldn't have been able to productize. And yeah, now that product is making fantastic revenue. So it has worked out. However, I do really recommend that for startups. Try and sell your services in a consulting format or another format, first of all, to validate them and then productize them alongside.
It's quite a different way of testing product market fit. And usually if you go back 10 years, right, talking about timing, and you probably had businesses doing the consulting where they're like, oh, we're just doing the consulting because it's keeping the business funding, but they would look at it as a negative. And you probably had investors going, oh, you're wasting your time because consulting is one-off activity and you should be focused on your SaaS. And to hear it from you where actually there's a lot of benefit in having that part of the businesses, things must have changed.
I think they really have.
On that topic,
Yeah.
what do the investors think, though, about that change, given the impact on revenue?
Yeah, so at the time, they're very bullish on it, but it's almost like a different era for startups, though. I'm talking pre-2022, and I really think it has been a sea change over the past 2-3 years. Investors were very bullish on scaling and unit economics of our software product, and they saw the profitability and the margins on software and were quite dismissive of the services revenue. Whereas now, I think maybe the opposite is probably true. I think investors are much more interested in profitability and revenue. And although they are discerning in the type of revenue, I think it's amazing the valuations that some startups are getting, even though they're not selling true repeatable license fee SaaS. They're actually selling a bit of a non-repeatable or marketplace type revenue.
I'm wondering why you think that is, though. Is it because there's less capital floating around for a lot of startups, or is it the uncertainty of the wider markets and all the wars going on? What's changed that mindset of investors?
Definitely a bit of uncertainty. I think profitable startups can choose their own destination, right? So they can weather storms, they can survive periods of uncertainty. And I definitely think we are in a period of uncertainty. So they look more attractive. I think just pre-2022, I'm not quite sure where that line really was, but around then, there was, I think the old world of VC-backed startups was just growth at all costs, win the market. It was that kind of Peter Thiel 0 to 1 like philosophy of just win, monopoly. And I think, yeah, we're going through a huge shift right now where I think it's very confusing what winning means and whether moats are even possible in a kind of AI future, or at least how they're made. I think revenue and profitability are placed in much higher importance, which I think is great. I think profitable businesses are great. And I think the sort of VC narrative of growth at all costs is actually dangerous for good businesses.
I couldn't agree more. One thing that I think is good for all businesses is impact. If you go back to 2015 to 2020, you probably looked at an impact business under a different light as a regular startup. You're trying to be impactful and therefore less profitable, less commercially viable. And I think there's been a shift in that as well, but I wanted to confirm that with you because obviously you've had this ambition from the start to make a real impact while also being commercially viable. Have you seen a change with that as well, or is that just me making it up?
Yes, I think so. I think the way I approached it, I think is not a very good method. less the way impact businesses are coming about, which was I was very impact driven. I was just very interested in changing commerce and making it more transparent and bringing more facts into shopping environments. And it was all very impact focused. It didn't start initially from a business user need. That came later through really understanding and unpacking the space. And luckily, because I had the time through doing it alongside a PhD, I got to really understand customers and what they needed and how it fitted into the kind of business priorities. But I think the majority of impact startups now are starting the other way, which is the business need and then connecting that to impact, or trying to have them both at the beginning, which I think is better. And I think that's been a really big challenge for Provenance, is the need for the planet and society does not always overlap perfectly with the need for a business. Finding that Venn diagram really important. Like, it's just absolutely, if there's not a real business need, or if you're B2C, a consumer need, then your business won't survive. You can't just have a kind of planetary reason for being. Unfortunately, the planet can't pay you. I think I'm seeing more sort of purpose-driven startups coming with their complete Venn diagrams, or starting more with a business problem and then realizing that there's an impact startup in solving that problem, which I think is the right way around to do it for a successful business.
Are there any other kind of tips or tricks that you might have for finding that balance between impact and profitability? Because like you said, you've been through a few pivots along the way and clearly made some shifts that might unbalance it. And how have you rebalanced?
I think the thing I always come back to is just, what does the customer want and what is their need and what is their problem? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, someone's going to pay you some money for your business to exist. And if you don't deeply understand what the kind of pressing problems and needs of your paying customer is, your startup's just not going to exist. It doesn't matter how noble your purpose is or how fantastic your vision. At the end of the day, someone has to give you money for your thing. And I think a lot of founders can be quite visionary and have fantastic speeches and great ideas, technological leaps, etc. But at the end of the day, someone's just got to pay you a buck for your thing. So it's, what are they paying for? What do they care about? What are they getting in return? Like, I always go back to basics with that. And so just trying to stay as close as you can to your customers and the jobs they need to do, I think, is the most important thing to having a successful business.
I want to jump back a little bit because you talked about AI earlier, like the impact of AI and how trying to find defensible selling points and product features is becoming even more difficult with AI, as you were.
Of course.
With blockchain. Given your background in technology and the PhD, it makes sense. But what are some of the things that you're finding that have you most excited about AI? And we'll flip it and talk about challenges.
Yeah, no, I have really embraced AI. I'm really techno optimist. I love jumping in, using new technology, seeing what they're capable of. So yeah, I've done a lot of building and experimenting with AI and use it a lot in my personal life as a kind of guinea pig. But then increasingly, we've been using it a lot at Provenance. I mentioned a whole part of the product, our kind of detect service, where we help businesses to make sure they're making credible claims. That's been a completely new product that we've built from the ground up with AI. However, what am I seeing? I think it is a really fundamental shift happening right now in SaaS software, how people buy software. I think we're seeing a lot more brands and retailers experimenting with AI themselves and realizing that they can build some services that they're buying themselves using AI. So it's really important for businesses like us to stay competitive and make sure we are integrating with those AI systems and also providing, I guess, a layer of expertise and a data set that adds value in that new world. I think we are going through quite a fundamental shift with how people use software as well. Like, the reality is a lot of people are now adopting ChatGPT or using a chat interface to do a lot of things. And it feels to me like that's the sort of the way things will continue to go. So yeah, at Provenance, we've got two tenets that we're really focused on. Like, one is just being the best possible kind of assistant to help brands make green claims, including interfacing with their AI tools. And then on the other side, it's really about being a data source. LLMs are only as good as the data they're built on. And increasingly, I think we're seeing a trend in the importance of trustworthy, credible, comprehensive data sources for various things. And one of which I think is sustainability claims about brands and products. And so we're really making sure we build out our data set to be the canonical source on that. And then increasingly getting that indexed by the LLMs so that if you're shopping for a new shampoo using Perplexity, Provenance is a source of information. If you're looking for a vegan brand or looking for a brand that has refillable packaging, for example, they'll use us as a source rather than trusting. So yeah, staying on top of that is difficult. There is a lot of restructuring of data, making sure it's indexed correctly. But yeah, that's the opportunities we see.
I like how you're using it to build your trust, if you will, your trust sensors. How are you seeing, though, the supply chains of the brands shifting? You mentioned one of the ways they're no longer purchasing some of the different software tools because they can build it all in-house, but are there deeper changes in supply chains because of AI?
On supply chain, I think I could see it impacting it quite a bit, actually. Just that intelligence, that live intelligence, and being able to make sourcing decisions very quickly that are very smart. However, potentially not very good for sustainability because it might make supply chain even more dynamic. Whereas traditionally supply chains that stay in place for a long time and don't switch up too much tend to have higher investments in sustainability due to those long relationships. So yeah, some potential risks there, but yeah, lots of opportunities for much, much smarter supply chain.
One last question around AI. You've obviously got people outsourcing decision-making, if you will, to the AI. You've talked a little bit about making sure the LLMs are kept up to date with the trust factors that you're producing with Provenance. But do you think people will care more or less about getting it right if they're putting it on autopilot to an AI? I know this is very future thinking, but at some point in time, people are just going to go, okay, this is all that I want, put it into the system, do it all for me. And how do you think that'll impact what you're doing?
Totally. There's this quote by Eames, the furniture designer. He said, beyond the age of information is the age of choices. And I really like that. And I think AI is showing us that in a way, which is we've got all of this information now, but it is quite difficult to make a choice. But if you could calibrate the AI to have your discernment or empower it to make decisions on your behalf, that could be really amazing. But I like to think many humans have integrity and would like to make some discerning choices.
Let's hope so.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Designer. Oh, Angel Investing Podcast.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I wanted to switch topics a little bit because obviously you do quite a bit of work outside of Provenance. And you got your MBE. Congratulations for services to diversity. And I was wondering if we could talk about diversity in the age of AI. So I lied. We were talking about the AI thing. But I'm curious how AI takes diversity into account and how you're training it or ensuring that the decision making and everything that you're doing is including what you've learned about diversity.
Yeah, I think the reality is AI is very bad for diversity in general because it's trained off old data and it's trained off data that is often giving a bias. And there's been very little work done in bias correction in LLM results. And lots of examples floating around the internet of draw me a picture of a CEO. It's always going to be a white man. There'll never be a picture of anyone else. I think that's an area that's been hugely underserved and it is really risky. And I think particularly in the situation we're in now globally with a kind of big step backwards on diversity and inclusion being led by the American administration. Yeah, I think we're at quite a threatening time for diversity, which is really sad to see. I guess, what am I doing to combat that? Trying to do my best to recognize it and correct it wherever possible. But the reality is that's very difficult to do. I think also trying to make this an agenda for the government and the large tech companies to take seriously. But again, they've got a lot to do, right? So yeah, I never really thought in my lifetime there would be a step backwards in diversity. I always thought we were making progress towards a more diverse and equal future. But I do think in a way we might be having a bit of a regression right now. And so it's just trying to make that the minimum possible. Yeah, but there are some great organizations, academics, books, thought leadership coming out on how we can be more thoughtful and correct these things. The solutions are all there, but yeah, it's just whether the government and particularly the large tech companies will take them seriously and invest.
Are there any practical steps that someone like me who utilizes AI for coming up with questions for a podcast, for example, that could implement that, ensure we're not being led by biased data from the AI?
Yeah, I think there are a few like prompt prefaces that you can put on. I tend to also keep a library of prompts myself where I like to write a bit about, give context ahead of prompts. And if you just have that saved in your notebook or whatever, that can be quite helpful. I have quite a few like prompt prefixes like that I use. And actually I create lots of them for like shopping. So I do loads of my shopping now through AI. And so I have a whole prefix of who I am and my kind of values and interests. And then so I paste that in and then I say, looking for a sofa. So I really recommend doing that, having just a bit about you and context, just ready to copy paste when you're using AI for a serious search. Other than that, I think it's in selecting what LLM you're using and supporting. Like I've really moved away from using ChatGPT, for example, and just use Claude because I just like Anthropic better. I think they've got better morals. I think they seem to invest more in sustainability and ethics. They've actually got somebody that does quite a lot of talking about ethics. Never seen anyone from ChatGPT talk about ethics. So yeah, you can choose at this moment in time if you're a Grok guy, a ChatGPT guy, or a Claude guy. So yeah, I think a bit of consideration on which car you're driving is a good idea. Not that any of them are like lion leaps ahead better, but they're definitely investing in different things. So I think that's important.
I agree, and I'm glad you use Claude as well. And
Yeah.
I think we'd be remiss to talk, though, a little bit about the funding of Provenance and talking about selection, because you have many investors involved, but one of them is the incredible Angel Academy network. Was that a conscious decision to approach them about funding, or was it something that you fell into?
I really wanted to have a balanced sort of cap table with Provenance. I was quite interested to make sure that we had diversity and equality in the structure of how the company was held, not just in the team. And I was made aware of that quite early through a few kind of other female founders, that having a diverse selection of investors, including female general partners or female angels, was a good idea. But it's very hard to do without Angel Academy. I think Angel Academy was, if not the best network in the UK for female-led investments with female-friendly investors. And they'd be incredibly supportive to me and to Provenance. I think people really underestimate kind of angel networks and their role in startups. I think VCs often get the glory, the big fancy funds. But actually, angel, they're the ones that really take the risk. They back those really early ideas. And they often personally care. They care about the mission. They're really interested in what you're trying to do. And that's really come through with our work with Angel Academy. Just off-the-cuff connections, checkups, lending an ear, even when times are not always great. Yeah, they really come through for us as a company.
I should know this, but I don't. Have you turned into an angel investor yourself yet? Or is that on the agenda?
Yeah, it's not on the agenda. I'm actually really keen to do that. I've definitely done a lot of advising and helping others that are very early in their journey with reviewing decks and introductions and all of that kind of stuff. I've done quite a lot of that. I think investing is the next step for me. I just want to do it properly. I'm quite keen to take the time and create a proper portfolio and give the headspace to the companies as well. But yeah, that's definitely my next move.
I'm imagining you having some good blockchain companies,
Yeah,
some good sustainable businesses, and maybe a furniture company too.
exactly. Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, nice diverse portfolio.
No. Look, it's been absolutely a pleasure having you on the show. I like to end episodes with a few rapid fire questions.
Okay.
The first one is, what's the best piece of advice you'd offer to impact-driven entrepreneurs?
Best piece of advice is from the TV comedy show The Mighty Boosh, and it is, look, there's a fence. Ooh, the fence is soft. And by that, every fence and barrier that you see around you is soft. Like you can push it over, you can get through it. Believe that it's possible and you can get through it. Yeah. Starting an impact company is really difficult. Looks like there's tons of barriers, but it's amazing how many of them you can push through.
I love the Mighty Boosh. I was trying not to laugh when you said that quote, but that is a great one. What's the most overvalued sustainability trend you see right now?
Ooh, most overvalued sustainability trend. I do think the sort of myopic focus on carbon is a bit of an issue. Like I'm obviously a huge believer that we need to reduce carbon. Absolutely. But I do think it's become quite myopic and people forget how interconnected it is with equality, diversity, nature. So yeah, I think businesses that only talk about carbon and their carbon kilograms and reducing that, I think is overrated. The problem is so much bigger than just kilograms of carbon and removing it. So yeah, it'll be that.
What's the most interesting thing you're finding in the blockchain space at present?
So I think blockchain is having a moment again, mainly due to Trump really being quite bullish on the crypto regs in the US, which is exciting because it's finally paving the way for innovation with kind of Web3 tech that, yeah, as I say, it's sort of 12 years old. I'm really interested in how token can revolutionize loyalty and loyalty of brands, restaurants, all those kinds of things. I think they're a really interesting rail to create real loyalty schemes and also loyalty schemes that transcend different types of things. Like, for instance, I'm very interested in how people can be loyal to more sustainable businesses and commit their loyalty. So yeah, I think the use of blockchain and tokens for loyalty is the thing I'm quite interested in.
Have you seen any good startups to invest in?
There are definitely a few. There's one called Try Your Best, which is the founder of Outdoor Voices in the US. They've got quite a nice little system. I think Blackbird is another one it's called.
If there are any out there doing EIS or SEIS rounds, do
Yeah.
that. What's the best book that you've read recently? It can be business, personal, anything.
I really enjoyed a fiction book that was actually written a while ago in 2018, but I only just got around to reading it, called Severance. And it is not the same Severance as the TV show. It's a kind of an apocalyptic novel, but it's great. It's really quick. I read it in 2 days. I really recommend it. It's great.
Fast forward 5 years' time, what does success look like for you and the business?
Fast forward 5 years' time, I think success for me is keeping my heart rate around 60 beats per minute. So low stress, being in nature as much as possible, working on fun, interesting ideas with cool people. That's what I love. And I hope I'm still doing that, be it in goodness knows what tech and what form. I don't really mind. But as long as it's purposeful, I'll be happy. Success for the business, I think, is, yeah, really keeping pace with the evolution of software right now. So really becoming that canonical data set for sustainability claims, agents and chatbots, so that we really become that really important single source of truth on that type of data. But also the impact. So making sure trustworthy, credible sustainability information is powering changes in shopper behavior. So linking to loyalty, linking to search, really helping people discover products that match their values a little bit better. So seeing that vision playing out on more and more retailers and brands is really the goal.
Honestly, it's been a pleasure having you on and chatting through quite a few topics. So I'm delighted that we get to cover so much and really learn from you. I do hope we can revisit this because I think Provenance will have grown, but the technology will have evolved again. And maybe we can revisit it and talk about where AI and blockchain are both at that point.
Definitely.
But saying that, for anyone who wants to find out more about you or keep in touch with what you're working on, what should they do? Where should they go?
Yeah, for Provenance stuff, our website's provenance.org. And then our main place of engagement is on LinkedIn. So I'm just /Jessi Baker, JSSI Baker. That's where I'm sharing most of my kind of thought leadership and ideas. So yeah, drop me a DM there.
Jessi, thank you. We'll speak again soon.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's it for this episode of Angel Insights. And another massive thank you to Jessi for joining us and being so open and transparent about her journey and some of the tough decisions that she made along the way. If you did enjoy listening to this episode, could I ask just one small favor? Could you like, subscribe, and share? And of course, tune in to the next episode. Until then, I'm your host, Tom Britton, and I hope you have a lovely day.